Hey everybody, it's Rainbow Ramblings. How you doing? I wanted to comment on the situation with Judge Amanda Hopkins stating at the end of a very brief court session on Monday that she may have to amend her ruling about live streaming the Barry Morphew case. And I found that to be very interesting, so I'm going to just lay some groundwork and do some quick explaining about what's going on. You probably remember that in 2025, a big YouTube channel called JLR Investigates, which had at the time about 400,000 subscribers, actually violated the judge's order not to broadcast this stream. And he went ahead and broadcasted part of the stream. He made these wild comments that freaked out the judge and Barry and his lawyer. They went into court saying this guy said off-the-wall stuff and we don't feel safe and blah, blah, blah. Well, rather than make JLR accountable through fines and through arrest or criminal charges or whatever, accountable for his behavior, she just went scorched earth and suspended the live stream. Nobody had access to Barry Morphew's hearings and motions and his trial. And that's totally unfair. So in 2023, there was a bill introduced and passed by the Colorado legislature that talks about live streaming court cases. And there's a constitutional right for people to be informed of the way the judicial process works. It's called legal transparency. And they want to make sure that due process can be viewed by the common man, the common person. And there's checks and balances. You can see how the system works. And if elected officials and people on trial and people conducting trials, if they're doing things by the book or not, it's very important. So you're not supposed to deny the public the right to monitor the legal process. There are ways that she could have addressed the problem. So she could have changed the system. For example, if you want to watch the WebEx, you have to in advance set up an account and with a username and a password and verify who you are, and they can log in before you're allowed to watch the screen, and then they can monitor the live stream. And if anybody is violating anything, they know by the login and the username and password of the person that's viewing the live stream if anybody is violating any of the judge's commands, and that person can be held accountable. So basically, now I think Judge Amanda Hopkins has realized that she looks really, really bad by going scorched earth and making this ruling in favor of Barry Morphew. They filed 31 new motions that are very important to the case and how it's tried and how the jury is picked and what evidence they're going to be able to hear, and everybody's in the total dark about it. And so my personal opinion is probably the state said to Amanda, this has to be fixed because this is a big trial. It's his second trial. There's huge public interest. These people have a constitutional right to watch due process. There has to be legal transparency. So we have to fix this. And so I believe she's going to have to rescind her order or modify her order and say, okay, you can watch it by WebEx, but there's going to be certain login procedures or controls, or people have to register, and with a valid photo ID or social security number or name, address, and phone number, however she wants to do it, and then open the court system back up so everybody can see what's going on in the trial. Now, my complaint about the judge is she doesn't really care what the state's case is or what the evidence shows. She always seems to rule in favor of Barry Morphew. They didn't want him to have bail. She gave him bail. Then she felt all in her feelings and all emotional. She felt sorry for the daughters that Daddy was locked up, and so she modified the conditions of the bond so he could get the heck out of jail and be walking around free until his trial came. And then, when JLR investigates offended Barry Morphew, then she just went scorched earth and made everything in favor of Barry and his lawyer, and she just totally went overboard and didn't try to have any remedy that was fair to everybody. So I think what's going to happen is before the trial, she's going to have to issue a new order. She's going to have to reopen the WebEx to everybody, and we're all going to be able to watch Barry Morphew try to defend himself against the charge that with premeditation he murdered his beautiful wife Suzanne. So in the end, the public and their rights and the Constitution of Colorado is saying to Amanda Hopkins, listen, you're just a local judge in a case in a little do-nothing county with a tiny population. Your power is not that broad and sweeping and absolute that you can deny the Constitution and the rights of the citizens, and you can totally shut down the concept of legal transparency and put everybody in the dark about this trial. Now, there were irregularities before the first time around when they tried to prosecute Barry Morphew. There was a train wreck of a DA called Linda Stanley, and her mistakes were so egregious they had to, scrap the trial and drop the charges, and she wound up being disbarred for misconduct. And so now we can't have a second judge torpedoing things, having an obvious prejudice toward Barry Morphew and making these sweeping judgments that are prejudicial in favor of Barry Morphew, and making it seem like now nobody can monitor what's going on. Well, if Linda Stanley was able to be accountable and be hauled before the people that regulate the licensing of attorneys and investigate complaints about their conduct, and she can lose her license and be disbarred, well, so can Amanda Hopkins. So she better realize that they don't want to have a second example of judicial corruption or unfairness or any shenanigans with regard to Barry Morphew, because they're trying to get a second bite of the apple and do their due diligence and have a fair trial and protect Barry's constitutional rights. They can't have a Star Chamber proceeding where it's operating in the dark, where only one or two credentialed media can come to the courthouse and 5 or 6 citizens who can fit in this tiny little courthouse. You have to make it accessible to everybody. So she just got her ego checked, and I think it's darn good. And I'm going to keep checking her behavior in all of her rulings, because in the past she's shown an obvious, in my opinion, prejudice towards Barry Morphew. And this last thing of making the courtroom go dark and suspending the WebEx, so Barry could escape scrutiny and people forming an opinion and discussing the case and everybody being able to watch due process unfold. She just went scorched earth in favor of Barry Morphew, which is, I think, a gross mistake. So I'm going to keep watching her, and if she keeps behaving badly, I'm just going to get a campaign going that maybe she needs to be reviewed by the same people that reviewed Linda Stanley, and took a look at her credentials and determined whether she could keep her license or not. So that's my feelings. Peace, love, and donuts, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. This is Rainbow Ramblings. Have a great day.